you're coming through clear.
Okay, yeah, if I connect before I plug in the camera, then it doesn't want to recognize that little camera, so.
Fair enough.
I forget sometimes just in my rush to get things on path.
Unmute.
Are we ready to go?
Hello, Michelle, are we?
Oh, yes, sorry. We are ready to go, and I was just reviewing the agenda. Thank you.
Do you need another moment?
Nope, good.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us to the May the 3rd, 2023 Finance Committee meeting. I call the meeting to order and start with a land acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Tla'amin Nation, as well as all Coast Salish First Nations on whose traditional territories we have the honor to live, including my home on Wai'ete, also known as Muscogee Island. We have before us an agenda, and are there any additions or changes that any director would like to make? And if not, would someone like to make a motion to adopt the agenda? I see Director Elliott. Oh, Director Elliott, do you have a question?
So I know that my colleague here beside me was hoping to defer one of the agenda items to when Sandy McCormick was back with us. And I thought maybe that might be appropriate to address it here at the agenda stage.
Well, I think it would be in order when the item comes up. I was thinking that myself, but I think when it comes up, a motion to refer it, postpone it to the next meeting would be in order, and we can just do it with normal process that way, rather than, that would be the most, I think the clearest way, because then that motion can have action for staff in it.
Okay.
Are there any other discussions? Someone like to make a motion? Okay, Director Lennox. Okay, Director Elliott. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. Okay, we have our minutes now from the Finance Committee meeting of April the 5th, 2023. Are there any changes that anyone would like to propose? Seeing none, I will see if someone would like to call a question, make the motion. Director Gisborne, Director Lennox. Is there any discussion on this to adopt the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. Okay, next up is delegations and inquiries. We have the first one is Maurice Primeau from BC Assessment Director, Deputy Assessor, sorry, Residential Vancouver Island, regarding assessment overview and 2023 assessment role. The delegations have 10 minutes each, and I will hand it over to Mr. Primeau if he's would like to address us. And thank you for approaching us.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Yes, excellent. Okay. I'm very conscious of the time in 10 minutes, so I'm going to get going. Thank you very much for inviting me to present to you Assessment 101, an overview of the assessment role and some highlights. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get going here very quickly. So let me just do that right now. Share. Okay. Move this out of the way. There we go. Hopefully you can see the presentation okay. So my apologies, I wanted to appear in person today, but due to scheduling conflicts, I was not able to come over to the Catholic Regional District or Powell River, but I will endeavor to do so in the future. So we'll move through the presentation. So I want to talk a little bit about BC assessment, valuation and market classification, the assessment cycle, relationship between assessments and taxes, and the 2023 assessment role overview, high-level overview for the Catholic Regional District. First, we'll start with who we are, what we do, and how we do it. So established as a Crown Corporation in '74 under the Assessment Authority Act, we provide a list of properties identifying ownership and classification for all British Columbians who own property, which is about 2.16 million properties with almost a $3 trillion market value per year, or a total taxable value per year, which provides about $8.3 billion in tax dollars to our local governments and communities around British Columbia. How we value different properties. So we'll start with market value, which is the most common and probable way that we value properties in British Columbia. It's internationally recognized as the fairest system for property tax burden, as properties within similar values or within similar property classes pay similar taxes, and it's easy to confirm. What does it mean to you that this provides to you a stabilized tax base for you to draw upon each year? So we look at market value using comparables to support our values. And then we also have some properties that are valued based on legislated rates set by cabinet, such as utilities, farms, managed forest. There are some factors that affect market value. Location, proximity to amenities, transit, employment, and recreation, land use controls, which would include the official community plan, neighborhood plan, zoning and restrictive covenants, building characteristics, area, shape, topography, access to utilities and services, etc. Income potential for commercial properties, for example, rentable value, expenses, vacancy, and capitalization rates. BC Assessment employs what's called highest and best use. This is a foundation for market value. What uses of a property are physically possible, affected by access to services, geotech constraints, slope stability, rock outcroppings, etc. What is legally permissible? Land use controls, including the official community plan, zoning, land use designations, restrictive covenants, etc. Financially feasible uses that generate a return above and beyond the cost to develop them, and maximally productive. Of the physically possible, legally permitted, and financially feasible uses, which results in the highest value. So that is the very high level overview of highest and best use. Very important to recognize when producing the annual assessment rule that we split properties into different classifications, and they, as you know, have different tax rates that go to each property class. The property classes allow a variable tax rate system for different rates for different classes. Partial or complete exemptions from assessment or taxation reside in other acts like the School Act, Community Charter, Local Government Act, etc. In the big picture, our taxes are distributed fairly. Our key function in the process is to ensure taxes are distributed fairly within a property tax. So class one, just go over them really quickly, is pretty much everything residential, land and improvements used for residential purposes, including SFDs, single family dwellings, duplexes, multifamily residences, etc. Class two, land or improvements used or held for the purposes of transportation, transmission, or distribution by pipeline. Think oil and gas, think fiber optics. Class three, supportive housing. Think of the Vancouver Island Mental Health Society, Kool-Aid Society. Properties within this class are determined by cabinet, and we receive the list every year from cabinet, and we put those onto the assessment roll with a $1 value on land and $1 improvement on buildings. Class four, major industry. Think of port lands, hydro dams, power producers, etc. Light industry would be gathering pipelines for the purpose of extracting or processing or manufacturing. Business and other, I'll come back to in a second. Class seven, forest lands registered within the province, such as Western Forest Products, etc. Those rates are actually set by cabinet. Class eight, recreational not-for-profit would be like golf, skiing, tennis, lawn bowling, racetracks. Those are class eight properties. Farmlands, these lands and improvements are valued based on the use of the land for farming operations and prescribed rates set by cabinet as well. I skipped over class six purposely because if something doesn't fit into any of these classifications, it goes into class six, which is called business and other. And this would be all your retail, your minor and major retail throughout the province falls into class six. I want to talk a little bit about our annual assessment cycle and key dates. So this is a cycle that repeats itself every year. January 1st to 31st, the assessment notices pop into people's mailboxes, and we invite the public to come and talk to BC Assessment about those values and any other information that may be correct or incorrect on the assessment notice. From February 1st to March 15th, as a matter of fact, so that date's incorrect. we have the property assessment review panel hearings, and we produce the revised roll. So March 31st is the activity that happens between February 1st and March 31st. April 1st to September 30th, we complete all of our assessment projects. New construction is inspected and added to the assessment roll. April 30th, in this case, this year it was May 1st, is the deadline to appeal to the Property Assessment Appeal Board, which is the next level of review after PARP, the Property Assessment Review Panel. I have another slide on that in a second. July 1st is our valuation date. This is a very important date for everybody who owns property in British Columbia to remember, because our values are set as of July 1st, but we produce our assessment notice 6 months later, January 1st. October 1st to December 31st, we put our heads down and we analyze all of the information that's come throughout the year and set the annual production roll. October 31st is the physical condition and permitted use of a property, and which is reflected on the roll. November 30th is ownership as per Land Titles Survey Authority records. December 31st, assessment notices are produced and mailed. December 31st, those names on the assessment roll are liable to the taxation. So BC assessment functions independently of taxing authority and does not set property tax rates. An individual's property assessment determines their share of property taxes for the property class for which they fall. BC assessment's function is to ensure the property tax burden is distributed equitably among similarly situated taxpayers. The assessed value times the tax rate equals the taxes payable. Whoops, sorry. There's a myth out there that if your assessment's gone up 20%, your taxes are also going to go up 20%. If your assessed value is lower than the average, your taxes are likely to decrease. If it's similar, likely taxes do not change. Higher than the average change, then your taxes are likely to increase. There's a caveat to this, that budgets remain the same and the model doesn't really typically change, i.e. the budget for the annual year stays the same and everyone moves at the same rate. Got a little bit of an example that I want to go through. I am very mindful of the time. If you would like me to stop in 1 minute, I can. I'm halfway through my presentation. Just please let me know.
Well, I guess if you can go through it with the leave of the board, I appreciate this presentation myself, but does the board agree to let Mr. Primeau complete his presentation for a few minutes? Is those thumbs up?
Yeah.
Be about
okay.
5 to 10 minutes and I can be done.
Okay.
We would like to know more.
Yes,
okay,
I think we're
great.
interested.
I like to
so
hear that.
Carry
Thank
on.
You so much. Thank you. Okay. So here's a little scenario I want to show you. This helps explain the last slide. If we had a community in a fictitious BC municipality that has a city budget of $65,000 on a property tax roll of $7 million, the municipality then decides your property tax bill by using a mill rate, a figure that represents about $1 per $1,000 of assessed value in the property. Mill comes from the Latin word millestimum. I can't really even pronounce it. So the mill rate is calculated by dividing the budget by the tax roll and multiplying by 1,000. So if we take our budget and divide by your tax roll and times it by 1,000, we get a mill rate of about 9.2857. If a home in this community is worth $300,000, the taxes that are value times 9.2 divided by 1,000, which equals property taxes of about $2,786. Let's say the market from homes rose by 10%, which means that the tax base also rises by 10%, or now equals $7,700,000, and assume the municipal budget remains the same. So we take the new value, or we take the budget value and the new tax roll value, divide by that, times 1,000, and you get a new mill rate of 8.44. But lo and behold, if we apply that to the new value on the home, the new tax rate divided by 1,000, you can see that the property taxes remain the same. So theoretically, if our home went up by that exact 10% to $330,000, then we have a similar tax rate at the end of the day. It's an analogy to try to help property owners understand that, even if their taxes go up, if their property values go up the same as everybody else, and your taxes may relatively stay the same if budget needs stay the same. But I mean, we have to be realists in all of this. It's interesting math, but we have to be realists. We have to consider that in this situation that the individual house went up the exact same amount as the entire property roll. which we, we try to achieve with our evaluations each year and try to treat everyone fairly and equitably. But if your property value increased by a percentage higher or lower than the average increase, then you'll see your difference in taxes. We know that things change. We understand inflation and discretionary changes to budgets, and that can have an influence on this. But this is a model that I actually saw in an article once, and I thought it was a good way to explain this piece that is featured on all of our assessment notices for property owners as a graphic. So I'm going to give a little bit of a high overview of the 2023 assessment roll for the Cathett Regional District. So first we'll start with the provincial roll. The total assessed value for the provincial roll, like I mentioned earlier, was just about $3 trillion. It's up 11.5% from last year. Total non-market change is down provincially just about 1% to $33.52 billion. And I'll get into non-market change in just a couple minutes here. And then the total residential value on the assessment roll makes up 88% of the provincial assessment roll and was valued at about $2.1 trillion. Total properties assessed in the province for the 2023 roll is about 2.1 million, almost a percentage increase, or about 18,000 folios up from the previous year. For the Cathett Regional District, the total number of properties on the annual assessment roll rose slightly by about 0.5%. To 12,591 from 12,522 the year previous. The total roll value is up about 17% over the 2022 roll at 7.5 billion. The non-market change, this is a really interesting figure, is up 665% from last year. This is class 1. So these are all your residential properties. We saw quite an uptake in the amount of non-market change that came through this last year. And when I analyzed the numbers, it's due to a lot of new construction that has happened in the Cathett Regional District area over the 2022 calendar year that we reflected on the 2023 roll. So move forward. And class 1 in the Cathett Regional District makes up about 91% of their entire assessment roll. So what is this non-market change I was talking about? So non-market change is the change in value not related to market, simply put. This includes things like all the new houses that were added to the roll, adds value to that non-market change. Demolition takes away from that. You take away the value of a house, the improvement value, it reduces the non-market change. Subdivisions, zoning changes, boundary extensions, property class changes, and exemption status changes. Maybe they got an exemption one year and then another year they don't. This all impacts the non-market change in a community. So non-market change is the result overall of the demand and supply for a real estate commodity. Not every property class nor subsector of the same class changes exactly the same. The market for commercial property moves differently than residential properties. Similarly, waterfront residential properties move differently than non-waterfront or strata residential properties. Just about done. So for the completed assessment roll, I just wanted to paint a little bit of a picture on where things moved or how things moved in the markets in your area. So of course we have the two main jurisdictions, Powell River and the Sechelt Indian Government District. And then we have your electoral areas, A through E. And this was the median value of the median value change for a single family dwelling in these areas for the 2022 roll and the 2023 roll. You can see we had a very strong year in 2022 with the residential market on Vancouver Island and throughout British Columbia. This year we saw an additionally strong year, but not as strong as the previous years. So we're seeing downward trends in some values across Vancouver, not just the regional district, but across all communities on Vancouver Island. So we saw a lesser increase than previous years. So that was for class 1 single family dwellings. The class 6, the commercial market, we also see similar changes. Last year, there were quite the increases in the electoral areas and then the jurisdictions. This year, we're seeing about a 10%, primarily about a 10-11% lift, with Lasqueti Island just going up about 6%. Okay. As the deputy assessor responsible for the residential portfolio on Vancouver Island, we still saw a very big demand for residential properties across Vancouver Island. This year, almost 10% increase in sales volume over the previous year, which I thought the previous year we were hitting some records. And then again, we saw more sales for 2022, which we used for the 2023 roll. This is one of the first times I saw just about 5,000 single family dwelling sales over $1 million to $2 million. And this is north of the Malahat. This is not in the Victoria Greater area. This is north of the Malahat. And then 620 sales over $2 million last year. Again, north of the Malahat. Absolutely staggering numbers. Vancouver Island residential single family dwelling assessments were up 10 to 20% compared to the rest of the province, 5 to 15%. So slightly higher over the rest of the province, but again, down from the 2022 roll. Almost done here. Business and other class 6. Market demand remains strong in spring and summer 2022. There was demand for industrial properties we've seen over the last couple of years, which really drove some values based on sales. Showing some signs of recovery from the pandemic with commercial properties, changes in commercial properties. That 30% is probably misstated. It should be about 10 to 15% in the regional district. And that was for, anyways, and compared to 10 to 25% of Vancouver Island. Sorry, that was a stat that I had from the regional district of Nanaimo. Catholic regional district was 10 to 15%. Sorry for that oversight on my presentation. I just want to go through a couple of last things here. The appeal process. So we've just gone through the property assessment review panel and closed that this year. Appeal numbers were down over last year. Typically, 98% of British Columbians accept their assessed values, so less than 2% of property owners appeal. We are now in what's called the lower stage, the Property Assessment Appeal Board. This is a formal level of review where people who may not have been happy with the Property Assessment Review Panel takes their appeal to a higher board on a more formalized and written level for adjudication. Decisions out of this level of hearing only move forward on matters of law to the BC Supreme Court. And last slide, there's tons of resources which I encourage everybody to take the opportunity to explore. If you go to bcassessment.ca, we have a very robust assessment search tool. You can look up almost any property in British Columbia and look at the assessed value. You can look at the values of your neighbors. You can look at sales comparables. If you build a small profile, you can then save those comparable sales to a little folder and use those in future if you want to, say, appeal your assessment. We have lots of market trends from around the province for almost all property classes. Really good, robust GIS mapping. We have information to understand your property information, all the different property classes, managed forests and farms and exemptions, First Nations. There's lots of information there. All about the assessment and appeal process, how we do our work, how you can appeal our work, and then there's portals for services for local governments. And that is it. I really apologize for the speed. I probably missed a couple of things. I probably tripped over a couple of words, but I thank you for your time.
That's quite okay. Thank you for approaching us. I find I really appreciated the presentation myself, and I think the process is very transparent, and I think it's, the separation of how things are done between the local governments and the BC Assessment Authority is very good. There's probably not a lot of time for tons of questions. If there's a few burning questions, I'll open it up to the floor, but the presentation was extensive and very clear, and I thank you for that.
Yeah, and if there's some questions that come about later after we close the presentation, please send them through to me via, her name escapes me, she set up the meeting. You can send them onward to me and I'll definitely respond to all questions.
Okay, thank you. So I see a couple of hands up, Director Gisborne and then Director Elliott.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Maurice, for coming in today. My question has to do about assessing buildings and land use. If you have a community that's all on a half-acre parcel with one house on it, it makes it pretty easy to kind of figure out what those assessed values are based on sales. Mm-hmm. But as we're seeing in local government and transition across the province towards more mixed use, kind of getting away from necessarily the single family dwelling, it's making this kind of big diversity in, house types and house sizes. And I'm just wondering, how is BC Assessment going to address that issue? Because it becomes really challenging when you got a community with, a residential type, which you might only have like 4 or 5 properties that actually kind of fit that category. And if none of them sell, it becomes challenging. So the question is more of like, how's BC Assessment looking at going from, say, homogeneous property use to, more unique and diverse uses?
Yeah, that's a good question. Through our current government, we've heard of some changes around things like density and use. So as we continue to work through those directives, we still continue to use market value as our barometer for where we need to set values. So carefully, we'll have to look at the sales, and realistically, we need to look at all the variables that come into play, like I mentioned in one of the previous slides. So it's an ongoing challenge, and we understand that things are changing in the assessment world and how things are developed and densities and uses. So we continue to keep on top of that, and we have conversations with our local governments too around issues that may be impacting them. But at the end of the day, we do need to look to market. That's what we're mandated to do by the Assessment Act. So we use that as our guide to move through some of the new and different property types that are coming through.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Gisborne. Director Elliott, you had a question?
Thank you, Chair. So my question, as you're aware, we have a mill here in Powell River that has closed, and we've heard from our finance, our CFO, that they can request to have BC Assessment do some change. Could you speak to that for us? Because the highest and best use doesn't seem to match up with what changing it based on what it's being used for now. The principles seem to be in contradiction with one another. Could you comment on that for me, please?
So what I can speak to on this particular, like I don't speak to property types specifically in these sorts of arenas, but what I can say is that we have been in consultation with your CFO. Our major industrial team has worked with your CFO to go through the classification and the values and the changes that are happening with the property. Right now, we've from BC Assessment side, we've valued based on what we have and the information we have right now. There are other elements that need to come into play from the owner of the mill site to come to BC Assessment. When that information does come to us about next steps, then we'll revisit conversations with the CFO around how we're going to move forward with valuation. That's all I can say on that matter publicly at this point.
Thank you. And I see, so we're running low on time, but Director Brander has a question.
Thanks, Chair. This is a really quick one, I think. I know BC Assessment is always trying to do many different things in order to get accurate assessments of properties. I was just curious if they ever considered asking the public to voluntarily report changes in their properties.
Yes.
You can include a form with the assessment, and then they can send it in.
Actually, we'll take that one step better. We have something even more robust. You can go onto our website at bcassessment.ca and report any changes to your property. That then flows through to us, and then we analyze the changes and compare it against the data we have in our system. And if we have some questions, we can contact the property owner and discuss those changes over the phone or by email and make the changes going forward. So that actually currently already exists. We also do mailouts. We're slowly getting away from mailouts just due to paper and cost, but we still do mailouts. We talk to property owners, when they appeal or inquire, but the electronic version of submitting information changes is already available on our website.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
Well, with that, do you have a very quick one, Director Gisborne? Because we're in the red if you notice negative numbers. So
very quick, just to follow up on Director Elliott's question. So my understanding is you're communicating with the city's CFO about the mill site. I'm just wondering, are you also communicating with the regional district CFO about the mill site? Because the value of that site changing can also affect regional district, because the mill is part of the regional district as well. So just wondering if,
my conversations have been with Mallory. Thus, BC Assessment's conversations have been with Mallory thus far, because it's situated in Juror 330. But you know, if there was a wanting for a discussion with the CFO of the Catholic Regional District, we can definitely arrange that.
okay,
Just reach out to me, and then I'll employ the correct members from BC Assessment who would be part of that conversation.
I think that would be up to the board. So
yeah, let us know.
Well, thank you, Mr. Primeau. As you can see, I think we're all very interested. The presentation was excellent, and we appreciate you coming before us to explain that for us. Some of the graphics, I think, can really help some landowners who, you know, there are a lot of moving parts, and I really liked it. So with that, I really, I think on behalf of the board, we'll thank you for coming here, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you. Call me back anytime. Come forward with any questions you may have. And thank you again to the Catholic Regional District for inviting me here today. I really appreciate it. Have a good day. Thank you. Thank you. Bye for now.
Okay, thank you, board. So now we have another delegation, item 4.2. That's Tracey Ellis, Tourism Powell River Executive Director, regarding annual funding agreement report and request for renewal. I see Ms. Ellis is in the audience there, so you can. If you're, I'll see you. There's a camera facing your way, so I get to see you your face as well. So you can see me on the screen, but I can see you're facing me. You're facing the blank chair. I can see from there. So thank you, Ms. Ellis. Normally the way this works, we have 10 minutes, and then up to 10 minutes, and the board will ask questions afterwards. So
Certainly.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Terrific. Do I have a clicker for changing slides for my presentation?
Clicker. Ms. Jules, are you able to click through the?
Yes, just 1 second though. I pulled up the wrong presentation. I'm not entirely sure that I have this one. Oh, to the agenda? Yeah. Just 1 second, please.
it is page 35 of 178.
Sorry, everyone.
That's okay. I can start talking if that helps at all. So I'm doing double duty here today as the Executive Director of Tourism Powell River. We operate the Powell River Visitor Center, and I'm here today to give my annual report under the current funding and to ask going forward for new operational or renewal of operational funding at the same rate of $16,000 per year for 5 years. I've been at the Visitor Center for the past 10 years, so I've gone from being a visitor information counselor through to a manager, and now the executive director, Tourism Powell River. So we do run with a volunteer board and some staff, being Emily Fahey and Melanie Anaka, and a volunteer, Mike Leahy, and summer students, which we have had 100% funded over the last couple of years through summer jobs. So I haven't needed to the regional district to ask for top-up funding for students. We've been able to manage that financially. I see the presentation is up now. And you said you have a quick sir. Just say next slide. Yeah. Okay, next slide. And next slide to services. So travelers can feel overwhelmed when they're traveling, and we are a stop on the way that can offer the visitors support, as well as we provide them with information that will keep their visit safe, including whether there's an avalanche warning, as we just had this past weekend, a fire ban or red tide in effect. And we generate additional revenue at the Visitor Center through membership, through retail, advertising, sales. We collect data on visitor travel through direction from Destination BC. We market local attractions and connect them up with local businesses. Next slide. For visitors, we create and print collateral and maps, including the street map, the town site walking tour, recreation map, provide key information on where to go, answer inquiries, offer public services, including a public washroom and Wi-Fi. And we deal with some complaints where they may not be happy with the room and want a new hotel room. Their steak was overdone last night at the restaurant. And offer pro-social customer service and the inside scoop on local attractions, things they may not have heard about that we can send them to in the Catholic Regional District. We provide information resources for locals as well who are vacationing throughout British Columbia. We can offer them direction and maps for that, help them with accommodations, also for medical appointments as they're traveling outside of the Powell River community. Some of them haven't traveled for many years and may not know where that hospital is or how to get to that hospital. We can connect them up with local accommodations nearby and transportation to help assist to get them there. We can offer them travel tips and assistance for like Drive BC, what's happening with fires in a region they may be going to or flooding, and local recommendations for things they can see and do around the places that they're going to travel to. We offer services to members and businesses. Next, slide. Information dissemination on attractions and events for visitors, and relevant information on tourism businesses to help them understand needs for their customers. Marketing and promotion, which is limited to local. So that again, that's maps, social media, events, calendar, printed brochures. We help our members with them who are unable to produce those themselves. We get those done for them at cost, utilizing our design serviceability. Advocacy and representation for local things that may come up for businesses. And we offer training through GoToHR for people who may want Superhost or other training for their staff. Outcomes. Visitors who attend the visitor center will participate in at least 3 more activities than they thought they were going to do when they got here. They will spend usually 1 more additional day at our coercion when we overwhelm them with all the things there are to see and do here. And that when they're educated on things they can see and do, that they will return. So they'll have many visits to Powell River, which generates more revenue for the community. And when we talk to them about things to do, like our top 10 things to experience, we just enrich their whole visit to the area. So philosophy, at a time where some of the visitor centers are abandoning their bricks and mortar facility completely, we've expanded our service, offering them new and innovative attractions at the visitor center, including repainting our bear, murals inside, redecorated our washroom, and a new sign with a ability for people to experience a visitor protocol for the Tla'amin Nation, as well as learn some languages through some language words locally through the QR codes that are on our new signage outside the visitor center. Next slide, above and beyond. So it's no longer about just a physical location. We deal with calls, emails, texts, in-person visits, social media questions. We attend events to connect with visitors. We offer more individualized attention. So they've chosen our destination, and we want to make sure that their selection, that they're happy with that, and that they know they've made the right choice in coming to the Catholic Regional District for their vacation. So the value of tourism, we just had Tourism Week, and so you've got a lot of numbers in here, but what we're seeing, what these numbers present is that the GDP or the value of tourism in the province of British Columbia is only second to mining. So that's a big takeaway for that page there. The public perception post-COVID, there was a survey done by Destination BC, which shows very good support from British Columbians for tourism, and that 61% of BC residents understand the value of tourism better now, having experienced what happened during COVID with the shutdown and people unable to travel. 75% of our visitors are British Columbians to our region. So crunching the data for past 5 years of visitor statistics. In 2022, visitors requested 10,329 pieces of information, but we served 28,608 visitors at the visitor center in the past 5 years. And you can see some numbers for Sechelt, Gibsons, and Comox below that. Comox, of course, having much higher numbers that through traffic on Vancouver Island, but I thought it was important to show that statistic as well. Sechelt, Gibsons, we're all quite close in our numbers. The 2021 to 2022 visitor center stats are up 7.8%. So we are in recovery now, but we don't expect to recover until 2025 as per Destination BC information. And overall, if you compare the past 5 years during this pandemic to the 5 years before that, we're down about 35% in visitation. So we have a lot of recovery still to do, which is a lot of more income for local businesses. locally. Local information requests over the past 5 years, lots for maps still. It's amazing people are not Google mapping. They're coming in for a paper map. Over 10,000 maps delivered. 2,700 want to go shopping, 2,600 for attractions and tours, 2,400 for transportation. Got to eat, 2,000 people, 1,500 for accommodation. And our local information requests that we can track are 4,480 for hiking, 2,937 for the Sunshine Coast Trail, 1,635 for heritage sites. So those are your kind of top attractions. And the area requests Desolation Sound, 498, 1,317 for Lund, and 658 for Texada Island. There's a lot of room for growth on Texada Island with tourism. So we reached out past the bricks and mortar. So you've got the bricks and mortar statistics, but our outreach also reached an additional 3,376 visitors through roaming and at events. We served an additional 6,679 users just in the last couple of years with our community app that we received support when we went for a grant for that. And it's performing quite well, but with an additional almost 2,000 people visiting websites through that app to point of purchase, right? They're ready to buy. Top apps, the visitor guide, of course, 2625, 1102 for regional info, 1747 are community people. So people in Powell River using the app, 946 to accommodation. Also direct calls to the visitor center through that, and people using the map to find out where the nearest coffee shop is, or where can I go kayaking, and show me on the map. And then resident attraction, 139. Website, next one. So we don't pay extra, so we only get 1 month worth of statistics, but in the month of March and April, we had 1,019 visitors to our website. 13% came back more than once. With the top referrals coming from the resident attraction site the City of Powell River has, Facebook and hellobc.com, which is Destination BC site. Top 5 interested visitors are Canada, the USA, followed by the UK, Germany, and France. So we can determine that. We moved the community calendar from website, which was just too difficult for local community members to navigate, to put their information in, to Facebook. And we have now had, in just 1 year, 26,000 people engaged with those events online. And we also include them in the community app. So it was double there. But more than anything, I have to say that I'm very proud of the staff, the support that we have at the visitor center. We have had some difficult times with the community resource center next door, which has necessitated additional staffing at the visitor center in order for staff to be safe. But we certainly all work very, very hard, and we were just overrun with visitors this morning, so I'm feeling a bit flustered from that. But it's a great place to work, and I think all our staff and volunteers really enjoy it. And the community support is really overwhelming. They're quite dedicated to the visitor center and come in often, and they bring their guests when they do come, so they're visitors. So I do want to thank you for your time today. And I do hope you'll see the value in the visitor center and what it brings to the local economy, and that you'll agree to support us for the next 5 years with this funding at the same level as we've enjoyed for the last 5 years or 4 years. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. So now I'll open it up to some questions from the board. So we won't be deciding anything here because that'll come up in our on the agenda in a future finance committee meeting. But now is an opportunity for board members to ask anything. And I see Director Lennox with his hand up, and then Director Elliott.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation.
Sorry, it was so speedy. I was very
no, you were trying to
come
in at the time, so that was great. You did a good job. Your presentation resonated with me from Area A, so the Lund destination sound numbers stand out. On that note, we have several community groups that are working actively to try to support sustainable tourism in our area, and I'm just wondering about the ability to share information with committees or other groups, data and maybe materials that they've developed. Is the best way maybe to become a member, or do you have any suggestions? That
we do have membership at Tourism Powell River, but we engage with the public and all nonprofit groups as needed. So we do everything from have speaking engagements presented to local seniors hiking, but also being able to sell the Cathalnia t-shirts, having a central location for an event where people can come in, engaging with Lund at one time when they had a map and they had advertising sales, but no way to facilitate, you know, getting the printer paid and everything. So we fielded all of that in and out of the visitor center to get those advertisements paid for. And so we're there to help wherever we can. And certainly we will just step up and engage to help. We have funds that we're holding for the repair of the water wheel, for example, because again, they're like, well, I don't know, we stick it in an envelope and stick it in a desk drawer. No, we can hold that for you and cash your check for you when they don't have the ability to do that. So
Thank you for that.
Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So we were just at our committee of the whole at the city yesterday, and we had Sunshine Coast Tourism come and do a presentation, and they're covering our area around marketing and all those kinds. Can you speak to any partnership around the marketing side of stuff where you work with them?
Sure.
Is there overlaps? Are we funding both to do the same thing, or how does that work?
you got to sort of think of the over umbrella would be Destination BC. And then your DMOs, your destination management organizations, come under that. And their Destination BC's job is to bring everybody to British Columbia. Then you have the DMOs, their job is to bring people to the region. So their interest doesn't stop where the Catholic Regional District stops. It goes down to Gibson and Sechelt as well. And then, so I would partner with them in that I would access cooperative funding through Destination BC, through the DMO, so that I can get brochures on the ferry, and Destination BC will pay half that bill. So we're able to do that. We also will partner up on shows, so I'm able to access that, and we can even attend a show if we need to stand in a booth and give that information out as well. We've lent out our bowler to Sunshine Coast Tourism, you know, because it was such a showcase, as well as our 3D map is available, which is that big printed map. If you've ever been in the visitor center, the 3D printed topographical map, it's a big draw. It shows as well. So we're in constant contact. So where we can engage with classes that might be happening, we would do that together as well.
And my second question around partnerships is, are you partnering with the Klamath Nation in any of their tourism initiatives?
I haven't heard of any, but I'm in constant contact with Drew Blaney, who's ex officio on our board, but also, you know, we talked about the canoe journey and all of that happening as well. If it's a more regional thing, it would fall to Sunshine Coast Tourism's jurisdiction, and I'm quite careful that I'm not stepping on their toes or barging in where I haven't been asked to go.
Okay, thank you.
Director Gisborne.
Well, thank you. You had made a comment about needing more staff to deal with the operations of the Community Resource Center next door.
Yeah, it can get quite wild sometimes, and more recently there's been some issues with public urination and some damage to our sign outside, but also you can have someone come into the visitor center who is maybe needing a little bit of help. And so while we have the connections that go in there, it could be one person in the visitor center. It's not safe, right? So that there has to be that second body there now in order to make sure that we can cope with a situation that could spiral out of control.
Yeah, and that's where, you know, I have a bit of concern, because, you know, when we go to fund Power River Tourism, if the operation of the Community Resource Center is placing additional burdens on you and your staff, then I see that as impacting, you know, our finances and our ability to, you know, fund and provide that service. So those kind of activities I do find very concerning, because
exactly. And I won't downplay the concerns, and certainly we want to be good neighbors, and they strive to be good neighbors too. It's a difficult situation when it does flare up for all. Our hope is in the future that we can find a home that we're not, you know, renting, would be nice. And hopefully somewhere with RV parking, also ideal, in order to, that would definitely alleviate the situation the way it is now, for sure.
Great, thank you. That gives me some ideas. Thanks.
Thank you. And noting the time, are there any further questions from the board? So thank you for the presentation, Ms. Ellis. That was very interesting. I think we all appreciate it, and thank you for coming to us. And we will be considering the request. I'm not sure when exactly, probably in the, but I expect it'll be the June Finance Committee meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And on to the next item. So unfinished business, there is none. That was easy. Correspondence, we don't have any, and hence there's no business arising from correspondence. So we're on to reports. And the first report is item 8.1, Security Issuing Bylaw, Resource Recovery Center, Waste Transfer Station. And there's a recommendation there. What is the board's wish, or the committee's wish? Director Doubt?
I'll move the motion.
Okay, seconded by Director Brander. Okay, so are there any discussions or on this item? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. I'm in favor. That's quick on that one, which is great. So on to the next item, which I don't expect will be so quick. Community Works Fund Allocation, Canada Community Building Fund, Policy 3.12. And there's a the recommendation is to discuss the policy and direct staff on any desired changes. So I think what we're going to be looking for is some direction from the board. So I think the appropriate thing may be to have brief comments on this, questions maybe to Ms. Green, and who's on the call. I see Director Hollow having her hand up. Do you have a motion or question?
I guess a motion. I would like to have this discussion deferred to a future meeting when Director McCormick may attend.
Okay, seconded. Okay, so is there discussion on? I think there's a discussion opportunity here. No, there's no discussion. So okay, I'll call the question on.
You can discuss the motion.
Oh, you can discuss the motion. Yeah.
You can discuss the motion, but it won't be the content of the report.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So you can discuss the motion to. It is open to debate to discuss the motion to postpone this. So I see Director Elliott and Director Gisborne. So on the motion to postpone.
Yeah, I would support the motion. I know that Director McCormick worked really hard to get this on the agenda. She has a high interest in putting forward her perspective. And I think it would be best for the board to discuss it while she was here. Otherwise, we're probably going to have to bring it back and discuss it again when she is here. So that would make sense to me.
Okay. Yes, that makes sense. Director Gisborne?
Yeah, over the years, I've had a number of comments around community works funds, and I would hate to sound like a broken record. So I am very much in favor of having this being postponed until Director McCormick is able to attend. That way, I'm not rehashing the same things over and over. And I would love to have Director McCormick here because, yeah, this is something that she's been working on for quite some time. So yeah, I'm absolutely in favor of postponing this until Director McCormick is able to attend, which hopefully will be soon. Fingers crossed. So
great, very good. Are there any other people wishing to speak? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question on postponing this motion. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay, so now we're on to item 9.1, a new business. Growing Communities Fund Allocation to the Resource Recovery Center borrowing cost, put forward by Director Brander. So over to you, Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to move the committee recommends to the board that the Cathet Regional District send a letter to the City of Powell River requesting that they consider partnering with the Cathet Regional District in an effort to reduce the long-term borrowing associated with the Resource Recovery Center project by contributing an equitable portion of their growing communities funding towards the project.
Do I see a seconder? Director Gisborne. Okay, is there any discussion on this item? Okay, so Director Brander, you're first, and then I see Director Elliott and Director Gisborne, and I can't remember, and
Director
Doubt. So there's the speakers list. Director Brander.
Okay, if it's okay with everybody, I've just written down some numbers here. These came from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. It's just when you start saying numbers, it gets a little bit confusing. So they have them in front of you.
And I appreciate it. I received the numbers by email from Director Brander, so I'm looking at the same ones.
Chair as well. So if everybody's got it, almost. Sorry, it didn't go around. On the piece of paper, it shows what the Cathet Regional District received with their Growing Communities Fund, and it shows what the City of Powell River received for their Growing Community Fund. If we look at the portion that the QRD received, specifically the $221,880 and the $281,000, those numbers were based exclusively on the 2021 population and 5-year growth of the electoral areas, not the QRD as a whole. So if we apply the same equations exclusively to the 2021 population and 5-year growth of the municipality, we get $420,720, which is on your sheet. That's $30 for each municipal resident. And then $431,000, which is $1,000 for each municipal resident, totaling $851,720. So the municipality received a little bit more than 4.2 million. The QRD received 1.367 million. My proposal is that the QRD say that we will give the entire amount that we received, the 1.367, and then the city would have one of two options. The first one being the 851,720, which is, as I explained, using the same multipliers of $30 for each resident and $1,000 for each new resident. If we were to do that and we joined together, we partnered with the city over a 30-year period of borrowing at 6%, we would save collectively $3.1 million. The second option that I proposed is that the city also give their $500,000 flat amount. And if that were to be the case, then the savings that would be felt would be $3.9 million, which I think is pretty significant. The RRC, the Resource Recovery Center, being part of the Solid Waste Management Service, is one of the few regional district services that financially affects every property owner in the Cathet Regional District. The City of Powell River is within the Cathet Regional District, so every dollar that we save on interest is reflected in everybody's taxes. 2 months ago, in either scenario, I find this to be a generous offer by the QRD to the city, because every dollar that the city contributes to reducing the borrowing, the QRD is actually contributing more than $1. 2 months ago, we didn't have this money. We didn't know we were going to get this money. We have a budget in place that is covering all of our expenses for this year. So this money is a windfall. And I'm suggesting, instead of putting the money towards disparate projects that will affect small percentages of the population of the QRD, we can partner with the city on this one, and it affects every single person in the QRD, every single property owner, I should say. It's not exactly the sexiest way to spend the money, but I suggest it's a very responsible way to spend the money and to reduce our liabilities. So
thank you.
Excited people picked it up and ran with it and sent a letter to the city to see if they want to partner with us.
Thank you. So before I recognize the next speaker, I just want to point out, and I appreciate the numbers because that helps to put it in context, but the numbers aren't in the motion. So the motion itself is simply to send a letter to the city of Powell River requesting that they consider partnering with, and these numbers might help them, but that's kind of opening a negotiation, and maybe the city would have other ideas, and these are food for thought. And if this went forward, then the actual final amount would come out of that process. So this helps put it in context, but the motion is that we recommend the board send a letter to the city of Powell River to see if they will consider partnering with the QRD on this. So noting that, I can't remember the speaker order, but I'll go to Director Elliott and then Director Gisborne and then Director Doubt. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. And while I understand the numbers and the benefit of this recommendation, the City of Powell River is currently doing strategic planning. They're not considering where they're going to spend the Growing Communities Fund just yet. It's going to be pushed down the road a little ways. I'm also aware that the City of Powell River is under incredible pressure for spending money on things that we are not getting help from the regional district on, including the rec center, which you contribute to operation costs, but not the actual costs of the building being upgraded, maintained, or any such thing. So if we're opening up conversations around partnerships and equitability and how we might be better partners in all of the things that benefit the entire region. That might come on the table as well. And I know that agreement's up for renewal. And I think the city's going to have a lot of projects on the table for this set of money. We don't have the same problem you have with not having very many things meet the criteria. We have a lot of things that meet that criteria. So, you know, I don't have a problem with the regional district putting forward that perspective. I just think it's premature and that you're not going to get a response from the city, and that may hold up your own idea of what you should do. And I don't think the timings are going to align with the RD's ability to make a decision if you're hinging it on what the city's doing.
Thank you, Director Elliott. Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. This motion tickles me pink, if that's the right word. There have been discussions in the past about the Resource Recovery Center, and I recall a discussion around community works funds that the regional district was using to put towards the Resource Recovery Center. Our community works funds are based on just the electoral area, and at the time I had, sorry, I'm gonna turn that off. So I do believe that when we get a grant for electoral area residents, and we want to put that money towards a shared service, I would like to see funding from the municipality, because when it's a shared service, it's benefiting everyone. So if it's just the electoral areas, you know, population getting the grant. So looking at the numbers that have been brought before me, we have $500,000 at the top, which is a flat amount. I see that as for everyone in the region, including the city, including the rural folks. And then $17 for each QRD resident, which works out to $364,000. I also see that as for all of our residents. But then the next two lines, which is $30 for each EA resident and $1,000 for each new EA resident, which works out to, when you add those two together, $503,000. That $503,000 I see as we got that money for the electoral area population. And if we're going to work with the municipality, then I would like to see the municipal contribution be based on population with a similar figure. I don't know the exact population breakdown. It's usually around 70-30%. So like a napkin calculation works out to roughly $503,000 from the electoral area, or from that portion of the grant, and that would work out to roughly 1.6 to 1.5 million from the municipality. And then that works out to being funded equitably based on population. And that's not getting into, you know, the history of resource recovery or recreation center or all the other, you know, history between municipality and regional district, because those are all big cans of worms, and we don't want to, you know, open up too much with our discussions. We would like to focus on, you know, resource recovery center, which is what this motion pertains to. And for those that may not think it is necessarily fair, you know, for the municipality to be contributing, I'd like to remind everyone that the city owns the land, regional district is leasing it, and it was a city liability for many, many years that the regional district has taken on for remediating the site. It's being paid for by everyone. And, you know, if the regional district hadn't gone forward with remediating the site, there would be a big liability still on the city's books. So I believe, you know, having some equitable cost sharing with the municipality and the regional district is a good place to start. And as those conversations move forward, we can start talking about other services that are, you know, either shared or run by the municipality and used by electoral areas, but I think it's a good place to start our conversations. So that's my position. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Director Gisborne. Director Doubt is next up.
Yeah. Oh, wow, so much to say. First, I'm going to make some comments on the motion that's in front of us. And I went through some of the history of this, and I looked at the video from the notice of motion. And when this started out as a discussion of a notice of motion, it was to use all or part of the growing community fund for the Resource Recovery Center and to ask the city of Powell River to contribute some money from the city's growing community funds. When we looked at the agenda here, it says Director Brander gave notice of recommendation to the May Finance Committee reallocating growing community funds towards RRC borrowing costs. That was in the minutes of that previous meeting. And then what we have today is no numbers, no commitment from the regional district to provide anything. The numbers are interesting. They break down a nice concept, but there is no commitment in there to actually use regional district funds to pay down the Resource Recovery Center borrowing. But it asks the city to participate. So the Resource Recovery Center is a regional service, which is paid for by the regional district. The taxpayers of the city contribute more than half of the funds to that project directly, and the city, as a separate entity from the regional district, is also spending money to build a road and to provide services to that at some considerable cost to the city. So I prefer to keep those things separate. When we have a regional service, there are processes for what's paid for by it. I'll tell you though, the day after the election, I got a call from the incoming mayor of the city of Powell River, who said he had heard through the rumor mill that the city was going to be finding themselves facing another big bill from the regional district to pay for the Resource Recovery Center. And what did I know about that? And I told them that the Resource Recovery Center is a regional service of the regional district. It's paid for by the taxpayers of the regional district, including members, residents of the city who pay taxes to the regional district. And any costs for the Resource Recovery Center would be paid by that program. I got a call a couple of days later from another councillor who was seriously worried that the city was going to be asked, even though the city has no commitment beyond the road and providing water, the city is going to be asked to provide more money for that. This does that. It does it without any upfront commitment of money from the regional district. Simply asks the city, whose taxpayers in their own regional district allocation are paying for the Resource Recovery Center, to pay more. I could have a long discussion and break the numbers down about what tax impact and what debt impact that would have for a city taxpayer and the regional district taxpayer, and see where it is. But frankly, the city has a huge infrastructure deficit, has all kinds of major projects. A couple I can name off the top of my head are the calls we had last night for more paving of streets and town site, possible borrowing for a fire hall, and the existing something like $30 million that we're borrowing for the wastewater treatment plant. So, you know, and reducing the city's actual city debt is going to be advantageous to the taxpayer too. So I'm voting against this. I would have liked to see it come with actually a dollar value commitment from the regional district, but I'm not in favor of asking the city to pay more than they're required to do, and the city taxpayers already contribute more than half of the Resource Recovery Center service.
Are there any further comments, Director Brander? And then I have a couple of comments. And Director Lennox, did I see your hand up earlier? Or did
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet. Okay, Director Brander.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I guess I just want to point out it's not a bill asking the city to pay more, because this is a service that is paid for by everybody in the regional district, not just the electoral areas. And I would argue that the money would actually go further, because for every dollar, at least what I'm proposing, every dollar that is given by the city would actually be matched by more than $1 from the regional district. So paying down, this would be a more efficient way for the city to pay down debt, and therefore reduce the amount of borrowing, I should say, and therefore reduce the amount of interest. And the motion as it is, you're right, there are no numbers put in, but it's quite benign, if you ask me. It's simply about sending a letter to the city to see if they would like to partner. And I have proposed a couple of options that I'm sure would be considered. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. And I'll make some comments because unless anyone who hasn't spoken yet would like to, and then I'll recognize Director Gisborne. I just like to point out and I think there's two key words in this motion for me. One is the equitable portion, that phrase, and there's been comments made around the table and clearly different interpretations of what equitable kind of means. That's a big topic. It's very political. We've heard different perspectives on that, and I don't think we can resolve that particularly at this point. But the more important phrase to me is the request that the city consider partnering with the QRD. That's the operative part of the motion, is simply to ask the city to consider partnering. So even though, of course, underlying that request is a consideration of provision of funding, as Director Dowd pointed out, I think the actual request is simply to ask the city to talk about this. And the city may support it. I mean, I can imagine three outcomes. The city may say, okay, we'll talk about this, and that's a positive outcome. The city may say, no, we've considered it, and the answer is no, we're not going to do this. We have other issues that have been raised by both Director Dowd and Director Elliott. Or the other possibility is that we don't hear back for a while because the city might say, well, we might, but we're not sure because of strategic planning and so on that Director Elliott said. So those are three outcomes I see, but we don't know what that will be. And the request isn't coming and asking, isn't directly saying, hey, the regional district would like to ask the city of Powell River for money directly. We simply want to ask, the operative part is to ask the city to consider partnering on this, and then the idea of what would be equitable if the answer was yes is not declared in there, and that would have to be worked out, and surely it's unclear even with the numbers provided. So I'm going to support this motion, but I think I just want to clarify the rationale for that. And I'll recognize Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Director Fall. I completely concur with your comments. This is still very preliminary. We're simply asking the city to consider partnering with the regional district. Yes, the city pays a bit more than 50%, but they have roughly 70% of the population. The last time I saw a breakdown of where the waste is generated was, I think there was a study done in the 90s that showed that the municipal population produced 90% of the waste, and yet they pay just over 50% of the cost. So I think they're already getting a pretty good deal from the electoral areas on that front. That's just how I feel about it. We do have other topics about recreation center. Sorry, I was going to say resource recovery. And we've got other topics about cost sharing, and those are items which we should be discussing. This motion is to consider partnering between the city and the regional district to have these conversations. If the city's response is, we don't even want to consider it, we don't even want to talk about it, fine. But then when we go to talk about recreation centers and all the other costs the city have, well, then my response will be the same. Fine, we'll close the door. We won't talk about it. It goes both ways. You open a door, it says, hey, we want to work together, we want to partner. But if the city's response is, no, let's just close the door, well, that's given me a pretty good signal for what we're going to do the next time something comes up about partnering and working together. So I'm in favor of this motion, and I want to see what the city comes back with. So thanks.
Okay, Director Lennox.
Yeah, I concur with the statements of the electoral area directors, and again, what's in front of us here is just an expression of to start talking. And I know for a fact there's only one taxpayer, and they expect us to explore all options to reduce debt load and financing, and explore the options in an open manner. And so I think I'm going to support this because it's not definitive, it's the start. So it's my position. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Lennox. Director Dowd, I believe your hand was up again.
Yeah. So
yes.
Frankly, this motion asks the city to contribute money. It does that. It's kind of amorphous about how much the city is being asked to contribute. But in fact, it requests a contribution of an equitable portion of their growing community fund toward the project, which is a resource recovery center. That's clear. No reason to say It's not the regional district asking the city for money. And there is one taxpayer. But in the case we're talking about, if you're a resident of the city, you pay taxes once to the regional district and you pay taxes once to the city. You may be one taxpayer, but if you're in the city, you're paying twice. This is one service paid for by the taxpayers who are residents of the city right now, asking the city, asking themselves, the other taxpayer who is living in the same house and writing the same check, pay again for the resource recovery center. I'm against it, you know, and I've said my piece, and I think, but yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Director Dowd. Is there any final? Okay, I think we've gone around on this one. Most of us have spoken, so I will put the question. Call the question now. All in favor of this motion? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and all opposed. That's 2 opposed. It carries. Okay, thank you. It's a tough issue, and I mean, we'll see where this goes. Okay, next item up is question period. Is there anyone in the audience, including the reporter, who may have questions for us?
Thank you, Chair. Galinsky from the Peak here.
Yes.
I do have some questions. With regard to item 8.1, which was the security issuing bylaw for the Resource Recovery Center, I seem to recall it being about $5.5 million that is being sought. Through the chair, has this been run through the Inspector of Municipalities?
I will hand that over to Ms. Green and our Manager of Financial Services.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, yes, it has been approved by the Inspector of Municipalities through the loan authorization bylaw. Mm-hmm. So the way that borrowing works in regional districts is the board passes a borrowing loan authorization bylaw. They bring it to third reading, the Inspector of Municipalities approves it, and then the board adopts it. So that part's already been done. And then the next step is we do a temporary borrowing bylaw, and then we draw down on that loan authorization bylaw. So this is like the third step. So this step is just basically allows us to now go to the Municipal Finance Authority of BC and say to them, we want you to issue long-term debt to us. So drawing down on that previously approved loan authorization bylaw. So this is just sort of like the third step in getting long-term funding from the Municipal Finance Authority through that previously approved loan authorization bylaw.
I thank the manager through the chair.
Yes.
So the funds have been expended then, and this is to cover those that went through the loan authorization bylaw. Is that correct? Or is this new spending?
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair. No, this is not new spending. So basically what's happened is we approved for the borrowing.
Yeah.
And then we've been drawing down funds under a temporary borrowing. So what happens is now we'll turn that temporary borrowing, we're basically converting that temporary borrowing into long-term debt. So basically this just approves us entering into a long-term debenture debt. So no, it's not new funds. It's just a converting that loan authorization bylaw now into long-term debt.
I thank you. Through the chair, will this be in the fall issue of the Municipal Finance Authority?
I'm not sure, Ms. Greenan.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, that's the intention, is to convert it during the fall issue.
Through the chair, I guess at this time you cannot anticipate interest rates.
I believe not, but Ms. Greenan may have more insight than I do.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, the Municipal Finance Authority of BC is currently projecting 20-year debt at 4.65%. So, you know, we're anticipating that the rate might be around that rate, but anything could change between the time between now and when the actual issue happens, which would be the end of October or November.
I thank the manager for the detailed responses, Chair. One more question through the chair. I'm hoping that Director Brander can send me the numbers that he gave to the board members at the Finance Committee.
I'll be in touch.
Okay, he'll be in touch.
Thank you, Chair, very much for the opportunity to ask questions.
You're welcome. And I don't believe is there anyone else in the audience? I think not. Is there, Chris, does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, Chair, one quick question. I missed the explanation of in regards to the assessor's figure of 665% increase on its slide. What was that in regard to?
So the presentation is in the agenda, and I believe that Ms. Greenan may help me with this, but I believe that 665 represents the non-market value increase in the change, which is not driven by changes in the overall housing market, but by local changes in construction, so new builds and rezonings and things like that. So it was actually, and the percentage, of course, you have to look at the denominator of what it means, but it's that increase is related to new builds primarily.
Got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well explained.
So we have before us a motion for an in-camera session. Would someone like to read it?
Oh, I can give it a try. Oh, it's a short one. I move that the committee move in camera, that the meeting be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 91K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a regional district service that are at their preliminary stages, and that, in the view of the committee, could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the regional district if they were held in public, and end the consideration of whether a committee meeting should be closed under provision of this subsection or subsection 2.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Okay, Director Lennox, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We are going in camera. come back for the exciting part of the meeting.
Yeah.
We're good to go, Chair.
We're good to go. Okay, so we're back into the open part of the Finance Committee meeting, and there's nothing left on the agenda. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
See you.